Welcome back. Assalamu alaikum to you. And we have Mairav Zonszein on the line. She's the Senior Analyst for Israel-Palestine International Crisis Group. And she's going to talk to us about the new coalition government in Israel. How's that going to play out? Is it going to be a better situation as far as the Israelis are concerned? And what about the Palestinian situation? Is it still same old, or are they going to find themselves in a worse situation with a new coalition government? Or are they hopeful that their situation will better? And what's happening about the two-state solution? Is that an option at all? Mairav, morning. Welcome to the program.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
You've heard my opening statements there. How do you respond to that? I hope you heard them.
I heard them. In Israel, it's very hard to predict what's going to happen. We currently have a new prime minister, Naftali Bennett. He's a national religious former settler leader. He won only 7 seats out of 120 in the Knesset, and he has become prime minister. That's something that's quite rare in parliamentary politics in Israel. It's unprecedented. This new coalition makes up 8 different parties. There's an Arab party. There's a center-left, 2 center-left parties. So in that sense, this is completely different than what we've had until now. We've had 12 years of the same prime minister from the strongest party in Israeli politics, the Likud. Netanyahu is no longer prime minister. For many Israelis, that's a huge achievement. He has represented a form of authoritarian style rule that has been very thuggish. So in that sense, some people are quite optimistic. Whether or not this coalition will last is hard to tell. It's very fragile. Netanyahu is now head of the opposition, and he has said that he will do everything in his power to undermine this government. But it's important to know that, as far as the Palestinian issue and the two-state solution, these are not issues that are expected to change at all. Even some of those elements within the coalition that are not on the hard right are not necessarily prepared or have the political will to move anything on the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. So on that level, we're not expecting much change.
So what are they bringing differently, or why is it that they form those coalition? Does that better the Israeli position in the occupied lands? And you also spoke about the Arab Party. Do the Palestinians have faith in the Arab Party, or do they just believe it's window dressing?
It really depends on who you ask. I mean, this is, in one sense, unprecedented. In Israel's entire history, there has never been an Arab party inside the coalition. That is something that needs to be mentioned as significant if that party, Ra'am, the United Arab List, can achieve gains for Palestinian citizens of Israel, for example, preventing home demolitions, or eradicating crime and providing more funding for education and infrastructure, then this can certainly be seen as an achievement for Palestinian citizens. On the other hand, there are certain aspects of Israeli, the way that it defines itself as a Jewish nation state, certain aspects of systematic discrimination that it's unclear will ever be completely eradicated. So some Palestinian citizens believe that Ra'am's entrance into the government is only going to normalize what is already a systematic discrimination policy. So it really depends on who you ask. I'm sorry, I don't know what other, you had a bunch of questions. What was the other one?
Okay, let's look at the issue around this coalition. You indicated that it's very fragile. What do you believe needs to happen? What sort of promises need to be made and kept for it not to probably break apart? Netanyahu has promised or threatened to come back. So what does that scenario look like?
Well,
and are the Israeli people, is this a victory as far as Israeli people are concerned?
Well, Israel is a very polarized country. In Tel Aviv, a couple of nights ago, you had, Tel Aviv liberals celebrating the fact that Netanyahu was ousted. There was there was a significant anti-Netanyahu movement, anti-corruption movement that considers itself to have, succeeded in helping to oust Netanyahu. And on the other hand, you had Orthodox Jews in Jerusalem who were praying out of a certain element of mourning that Netanyahu's government has been ousted. So there's no way to speak of a majority of Israelis one way or another. It's extremely polarized. Again, what was your first question? I'm sorry, I can't keep up. I think it was about the fragility of the coalition, right?
Yes.
How will it stay together? What brought this coalition together was Netanyahu. Every single party leader, there are three parties in this coalition who are right-wing parties. One of them actually defected from the Likud party, Gideon Sa'ar. He tried to make it on his own. He didn't really succeed. Naftali Bennett has also worked under Netanyahu in the past. These are all right-wing figures who have chosen to defect from Netanyahu and are interested in creating a style of governance that is not as bullyish, that is more, bases itself on professionalism, less so on being loyalist to Netanyahu. But their policies are still right-wing policies. And I think as long as Netanyahu remains in opposition and remains a dominant factor in Israeli politics, this will provide them with more and more determination to remain together. They have already, though, basically lowered expectations that they will do anything significant, because each side, Lapid, who is from the center, and Bennett from the right, who are the rotating prime ministers, they have kind of given each other veto power on anything major. And Naftali Bennett is a pro-settlement, anti-two-state solution politician. So, on the one hand, he can't really do much, because Lapid will veto him. And on the other hand, the status quo in Israel is a continued occupation and a de facto annexation. That is not expected to change at all. And I think this coalition will primarily focus on small issues of economy and infrastructure that it can have agreement on and compromises on. But on the bigger regional issues, there is not expected to be any change.
Okay. Bennett has said, and I quote, "The Jewish people are a nation of opinions," unquote, and that the Jewish people lost their first kingdom due to failure to compromise. What do you make of those statements? What is he really saying there?
Well, Bennett said this the other day when in his first speech as prime minister in the Knesset. He was basically heckled so much by the Likud and other right-wing members of Netanyahu's government that he was barely able to complete a sentence. So he was trying to kind of say, listen, we have many different opinions. I mean, there's this idiom amongst Jewish people that, 2 Jews, 3 opinions, that we like to argue. It's something that that is in our culture. It's in our practice of study. And so he was referring to that and trying to say, look, we can have disagreements, but that doesn't mean that we're enemies. It doesn't mean that we're going to hate each other. And he has consistently tried to say that the fact that there is a new government is something that is normal in what he considers to be a functioning democracy. And again, this is part of Netanyahu's legacy, which is to create a sort of incendiary situation in which anybody who's not in power, that's not him, is somehow going against the security and the legitimacy of the state of Israel. So when he said this, he was trying to say, look, you can disagree with me, but that doesn't mean that I'm not a legitimate prime minister. That was the point of that.
Let's just go back to the whole story around the two-state solution. This has been on the cards for a long, long time. Recently, I spoke to a Palestinian activist who indicated that that's just not an option at all. As far as Palestinians are concerned, they are an occupied nation, so there's just no discussion as far as two-state solution is concerned. Why do certain people still find that a viable option? What is it that is so viable about that?
Well, I think that the parties within this coalition who do still believe in a two-state solution, and if you ask Israelis, I'm sure a good amount of them will still, although it's declining, will still say that they believe in a two-state solution. The reason is because the alternative, as it currently stands, is one state with one sovereign in which Jews and Palestinians live together, and they need to either have equal rights, which for many Israelis means the end of a Jewish state, the end of a Jewish majority state where Jews have self-determination, or the de facto reality today, which is that you have Jews and Palestinians who live together more or less in different ways between the Mediterranean and the Jordan River, and they don't have equal rights. And so you have what many have called now an apartheid situation. So many Israelis want to live in a country where they have defined borders, where they're considered legitimate by international institutions, and can have a majority of Jews in that country where the government is made up of Jews. This is what the Zionist vision essentially is. So you have many Israelis who still believe that a two-state solution is the only way for Israel to be both Jewish and democratic. That's arguable, of course, depending on who you ask. But that is the thrust behind why people and also in other countries in the US still believe that a two-state solution is the way to provide both Jews and Palestinians with democratic states that are viable and that provide some element of stability and security. One of the main reasons why it seems impossible today is because Israel has moved many of its citizens, over 500,000, into occupied territories. And it has completely blurred the boundaries between Jews and Palestinians. So if it wanted to have such a state that had defined borders, it has undermined that goal. So in that sense, it seems impossible.
Okay, and that's where we leave it. Thank you indeed for being with us. And we're just going to have to wait and see how this plays out, and hope and pray common sense prevails, and eventually peace will come to the people that need stability in their lands, and possibly get back the lands that has been stolen from them. Mairav, thank you indeed for your time on the show this morning. It is exactly 27 after 9 o'clock.
Thank you.